Will you commit, yes or no, to immediately unmasking every agent conducting immigration enforcement and requiring them to wear standard uniforms with identifiable badges?
No.
Most people think this DHS funding fight is about keeping the government open. It isn't. It's about what both parties are willing to shut down the government over and what that says about their real priorities. Because Democrats and Republicans have until February 13th to strike a deal, and right now they're miles apart. And what's the biggest sticking point? Masks. Democrats don't want ICE agents operating in masks. Republicans are signaling that they are willing to risk a DHS shutdown over protecting that policy. In this video, I'll show you why a deal looks unlikely before the deadline, why masks have become the hill to die on, and what this standoff reveals about political incentives. And here's the part that should make you pause. The same party that refused to wear masks during COVID is now ready to shut down DHS to protect them. Okay, let's break it down. Oversight over ICE detention centers has been a hot button issue for years. Conditions, accountability, transparency. But interestingly, that's not where the sharpest divide is right now. The biggest flashpoint appears to be ICE agents wearing masks during operations. Republican leaders like Speaker Mike Johnson and Todd Lyons argue that anonymity is necessary. They say agents face threats. They say that their families could be targeted. They say exposure puts them in danger. That's their position.
When you're talking about masking, the reason that ICE agents wear masks is to protect their own identities and protect their own families.
Democrats counter with a very different comparison. They point out that regular police officers all across the country do not wear masks. They wear name tags, badge numbers, body cams. These officers routinely go after gang members, drug dealers, violent offenders, and yet they operate with visible identification. So, the Democrats' argument is simple. If local police can operate transparently while pursuing violent criminals, why should federal immigration agents operate anonymously while conducting immigration enforcement? That's the crux of the disagreement.
Now, I was a prosecutor for 10 years. Prosecuted mob bosses, organized crime, violent criminals. The actual worst of the worst. Not a single criminal law enforcement agent that I worked with wore a mask to conceal their identity. But your department, which is a civil law enforcement agency, is defending the use of masks by your agents because of a so-called rise in threats and assaults against your officer. Now, you said in your opening testimony that assaults against ICE officers are up by more than 1,400%. Which is now even more than the 1,300% that your gaslighting spokesperson, Tricia from Ohio, has recently been citing. But here's the problem. There are two separate, very detailed, very thorough investigative reports based on your own data that both conclude that assaults against ICE officers are up about 25%.
But then the argument escalates further. Democrats argue that anonymity emboldens misconduct. If no one knows who you are, your badge number isn't visible, if your face is covered, then they argue that this lowers the psychological barrier against aggressive and even cruel behavior. In other words, masks don't just protect agents, they potentially remove accountability. Republicans push back on that hard. They say that these are paid federal agents that are enforcing the law. They argue that the real danger isn't from the agents, it's towards them. They point to protests, doxing, online threats. Their argument is that masks protects agents and their families from retaliation. And here's where the contradiction sharpens. Because while Republicans argue that masks are protecting these paid agents, critics argue that these masks make tax-paying citizens feel less safe. Think about it. If armed agents show up in your neighborhood wearing masks and without visible identification, is that calming or is it escalation? This isn't just about optics, it's about trust. Public trust in law enforcement has already been strained for years. Transparency tends to increase legitimacy. Anonymity tends to increase suspicion. Now, zoom out. Why would either party be willing to let DHS funding hang in the balance over this? Because this isn't just about masks. It's about the control of the narrative. For Republicans, defending anonymity reinforces a law and order posture. It signals strength. It signals protection of agents. It signals defiance against progressive pressure. For Democrats, opposing masks reinforce a civil liberties and accountability message. It signals oversight. It signals transparency. It signals resistance to what they frame as overreach. So, the fight now becomes symbolic, but the consequences are real. If no deal is reached by February 13th, DHS funding is at risk, and that affects more than just ICE. TSA, disaster response, border operations. This is where the political gamble becomes interesting. Are Republicans truly willing to risk a shutdown consequences over mask policy, or is this leverage? Or are Democrats truly willing to compromise? Or are they calculating the optics? Because if you strip away all the rhetoric, this is about incentives. Each side believes its base will reward them for holding firm. And when base politics outweighs institutional stability, you get standoffs like this. So here's the bigger question. Is anonymity really worth a shutdown? Or is transparency worth the political cost? And more importantly, what does this say about our current political environment when a policy like mask usage becomes a defining line in a federal funding fight? This isn't a simple red versus blue issue. It's a trust versus security issue, accountability versus protection. And right now, both parties appear willing to risk real-world consequences to defend their version of the answer. We'll see if a deal gets done by tomorrow, but the fact that masks, not budgets, not detention oversight, not structural reform are the largest divide, that tells you something about where our politics currently lives. Not in nuance, not in compromise, but in symbolism. And when that symbolism starts driving funding decisions, that's when voters need to start paying attention. But you guys let me know what you all think. Until next time, peace and stay informed.